Welcome to the Mitra Consulting webinar series, where industry insight meets practical strategy. At Mitra Consulting, we help organizations navigate growth, innovation, and transformation with confidence. In each session, we bring you expert perspectives, real-world solutions, and forward-thinking conversations designed to help leaders make smarter decisions and drive meaningful results. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's get started. Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the Mitra webinar series and today's discussion, which is BEAD compliance over the next 5 to 10 years. This reminder to please use the chat feature if you have any questions during the webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we will also have a Q&A session following our presentation. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce our webinar speaker, which is Earnie Holtrey. Earnie brings more than a decade of experience working at the intersection of government, infrastructure, and private industry, and helping organizations turn complex public funding opportunities into real-world results for communities. He has a background that includes senior leadership roles with the Indiana Broadband Office and the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, and he has been directly involved in shaping and supporting infrastructure initiatives that expand connectivity, strengthen resilience, and drive the economic development. His expertise spans broadband strategy, public-private partnerships, government relations, stakeholder engagement, and funding advisory services, with a particular focus on major federal and state programs, including BEAD. Earnie has helped utilities, broadband providers, and community leaders navigate the challenges of policy, compliance, deployment, and implementation, while also aligning projects with both public priorities along with business objectives. So what makes Earnie especially valuable in today's conversation is his ability to bridge that gap between policy and execution. And he understands not only how these programs are designed in Washington, but also at the state level, but also what it takes on the ground to successfully deliver these projects, manage partnerships, and create those lasting impacts for different communities. So please join me in welcoming Earnie Holtrey.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Glad to be here today, and thanks for everyone making time on a Friday afternoon, holiday weekend, to listen in. Hopefully this will provide some value to you and a little summary of what's going on in BEAD and what we're doing here at Mitra. So welcome to this Mitra Consulting webinar. As Chad said, we've got a lot to cover today. So whether you're an ISP who's already signed your BEAD grant agreements, or you're an engineering firm positioning to support those awardees, or even if you're just watching the program and how it affects your market, hopefully this conversation is built for you. Once again, Chad will be moderating today. He'll jump in a couple times with some follow-up questions, so this won't just be a one-way lecture. And as he said, feel free to throw some questions or comments in the chat throughout. Preview of the segments today. We're going to cover where the BEAD program stands right now. Give you a quick first-hand recap of Fiber Connect 2026, the Fiber Broadband Association event that just finished up in Orlando, Florida. I'm actually coming to you from Florida still, heading back tomorrow to home in Indianapolis. And then finally, we'll do a candid look at supply chain, labor issues, and things like that that are reshaping how build-out unfolds here for the BEAD program. So stay with us for the next 30 minutes. We've got a lot to cover today. A lot of it hopefully will be affecting your organization for the next 5 to 10 years. And as Chad said, for your colleagues that missed this, we'll be sure to post this on the Mitra social media platforms. So where to start today? The short answer of where we are, we're further along than most people realize, and the clock is already running. So looking at the Connected Nation BEAD tracker and looking at the NTIA BEAD tracker, we can see that all 56 states and territories have submitted their final proposals. All but 2 have received NTIA approval. All but 4 have cleared the NIST financial review. And that's the first step in actually unlocking those grant funds that will go from U.S. Department of Commerce, NTIA, to the state broadband offices themselves. 52 have also signed their award agreements, and that's the last step. So finally, the state broadband offices in all but 4 states and territories are able to move forward and start negotiating those grant agreements with you, the subgrantee awardees. More than 90% of the eligible entities already have cleared every federal major hurdle. We waited so long for that. Just last week, we had the first connections for the BEAD program after all of these years. A wireless company in Nebraska, connected some locations using the Toronto wireless gear on the tower. And Louisiana worked with Nextlink and connected the first homes in Louisiana. So the state broadband office in Louisiana, Connect LA, have led the way all along. So it's good to see them continuing to lead and provide those first connections. And in the second state, right there along the same day, the same week it happened. So we can finally say people are being connected through this BEAD program. And now we all can be a part of this moving forward and connecting thousands and millions of others. So the 2 trackers links should be placed in the chat here in the next few minutes if they aren't already. But one thing to kind of think about in general, seems like fiber comes in at a little bit over 60% of the technology used across the country. That's almost 4 million locations. And then fixed wireless, coax cable, and satellite technologies would make up the remainder. As I talk about the satellite awards, there's really some tension there. The fiber first preference was real, but so was the cost per passing pressure. So some states tried to push back, but really they landed on what we've landed on is what matters is that there could be future opportunities to overbuild those satellite award locations. And again, that would be something we'd love to talk to you about here at Mitra. Moving on to our next slide, and we talk a little bit about compliance and subgrantee agreements. Before we get into the Fiber Connect recap, I wanted to spend a few minutes on a few topics that don't get enough attention. And that is the subgrantee agreements, the letters of credit, or performance bonds, early compliance pieces to your program, and infrastructure reporting. Subgrantee agreements are not formalities, right? They're a governing document for your compliance obligations over the next 5 to 10 years, that federal reporting period.
And it looks like Ernie may have froze on us there from Orlando, so hopefully he'll get back and join us. But some of the things he was talking about was the subgrantee agreements, and they're not formalities. They're the governing document for your compliance obligations for those next 5 to 10 years. And the language in those agreements varies significantly by state. And some of that does carry some real financial and operational risk as well. One of the other things, one of the other details is the letters of credit and the performance bonds. And many of those agreements include significant financial security requirements with very hard deadlines, and we have to make sure that we're hitting those deadlines. It's not new territory really in federal broadband programs and in prior programs. And missing those deadlines cost awardees their funding. So you've got to make sure we're doing all the compliance portions of this as well, because it will happen again to someone in this cycle. So it always does happen. Someone will not meet those requirements and make sure they're hitting the compliance portion of this as well, which goes into to that reporting. It's not optional. Giving NTIA's requirements, they begin on day one of your award. And Ernie, it looks like you're back with us. We've kind of talked through some of that subgrantee and letters of credit type stuff. So if you want to kind of pick up on compliance and reporting.
The next topic would really be about the pre-construction compliance and review. It's very valuable. It's very important. And you need to think about that before you're breaking the ground. Map out your grant agreement terms to your actual operation plan. So comparing those 2 documents side by side, because every gap you find now crosses off a fraction of the work and the cost that you could incur later if you do not have these 2 processes running simultaneous. So really landing on compliance obligations didn't start when construction began. They started the day your state signed their grant agreement. And again, we think that this is the core of what Mitra does. Things like subgrantee agreement review, letter of credit and bond compliance, reporting setup, pre-construction audits. We work with a small number of clients intentionally because work requires real attention to your specific contract language, not a templated checklist that we mass market to hundreds of customers. So if any of what I have just talked about and described is keeping you up at night, let's talk soon. Your call to action for this is really pull out your subgrantee agreement this weekend or early next week and read every compliance deadline in there. And that's your homework, and make sure that that matches up to your project plans, because we've waited all this time and now we're finally ready to get started. Kind of to pivot a little bit to a different topic, Fiber Connect 2026, presented by the Fiber Broadband Association. I think this was the fifth year out of six that I've attended, and another great year. Over 5,000 attendees this year, 300 exhibitors. So there were 22 rows in the exhibit hall. Over 270 speakers. It's Fiber Broadband Association's largest event in their 25 years history. And they did light years ahead for the theme this year. And that wasn't just marketing. That was a genuine energy that we felt in the industry because we've crossed this BEAD threshold finally. A lot of talk about AI and how AI is framed. A keynote speaker made it explicitly clear that fiber is no longer just broadband infrastructure, it's AI infrastructure. So that's something that our engineering firms and our construction firms and our broadband offices and our ISP subgrantee awardees all have in their mind is how is fiber and the work that we're doing from a labor standpoint, from an equipment availability standpoint, from a institutional knowledge standpoint, constantly competing against AI, and AI seem to get the preference everywhere and all the time. So how can we talk about those two being simultaneous with one another as opposed to competing for resources? So that was coming up a lot down here this week. The same fiber connecting a rural household is going to be part of a physical connection for an AI hyperscaler or a campus somewhere, right? So that's a fundamental shift on how the industry is starting to view itself, and it has real implications. So if you have any connections and backdoors into policymakers and what they're thinking, now's the time to make yourself heard at that elected official level too. The reality check is that and what really struck me after going to some of the sessions, being closer on the ground, many of the BEAD projects may not be shovel ready until 2027. So there is a gap right now between the program on paper and where it is operationally. So yes, we are now the states are cleared with their paperwork, but we know that there's some things that you as the ISP still need to do, environmental permitting, railroad crossings, those sort of things. And there again, this is something that we at Mitra would love to be involved in helping you with. Three primary things that came out of Fiber Connect. First, the convergence of AI and broadband. The demand's not going away. Second, workforce is a limiting factor. Nobody has that fully solved. And third, non-BEAD participants still have a window to be involved and to really do some build out during these next couple of years. So if you're an engineering firm, a construction company, a technology vendor who wasn't involved in BEAD directly, Fiber Connect made it very clear that the opportunity is enormous, and positioning yourself by building relationships with the awardees or knowing where the awardees will be and where they won't be and where satellite may be is a market that you might want to consider playing in. So Fiber Connect confirmed what we already expected. The build is real, the timeline is compressing, and organizations preparing now will define the landscape moving forward. Chad, do you have any questions or any follow-ups so far?
Actually, I was just getting ready to ask you a question. So you had mentioned the workforce being a constraint that nobody has fully solved at this point. What specifically should operators and engineering firms be doing today before that ramp really hits in 2027?
Sure. I mean, labor's different than equipment availability, right? We can't manufacture labor. We can manufacture fiber and conduit and handholds and all the different pieces of the network. But labor's a little different. Um, this bridge is really into segment four and what we were going to start talking about next. The labor slide covers four action items. We can break this down one by one. Supply chain and labor are not background issues in BEAD execution. They're a critical path, right? Fiber lead times, ribbon fiber, 60 weeks or more, we're hearing. Loose tube fiber anywhere into late quarter three, mid quarter four at a minimum before you can see that on orders placed now. So if you haven't placed procurement orders, you already may be behind schedule. So that's really the time to get with your vendors and see and be looking at what their calendar looks like as far as lead times. Three forces seem to be converging: the BEAD projects coming online, the hyperscalers that we already talked about, and construction consuming enormous volume, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles of the world, spending billions of dollars a year on AI infrastructure. And then we're dealing with the Build America, Buy America, the BABA requirement. Means you can't simply source internationally to relieve the pressure. Fiber Broadband Association did a supply chain working group study, and it called out exactly that. New manufacturing capacity commissioned last year or this year won't come online until late 26 or even into 27. So there's no real short-term fix. One thing I would consider is, after talking with 4 or 5 state broadband offices down at Fiber Connect, is start talking to the broadband office about your gaps in your supply chain and start asking for waivers now. NTIA does have a formal waiver process for the state broadband office to go through. I think the more ISPs that alert the broadband office of concerns, if you haven't already, the more concerns that the broadband offices can flood NTIA with, and then the NTIA can move that up. It's going to go all the way to the White House for some of those waiver decisions. So moving on to the next slide, labor picture. Industry estimates point out that there could be as many as 200,000 additional workers needed to sustain the pace of the U.S. fiber deployment that's currently underway. I've heard that 200,000 for a few years now, so I would say that that's even a underestimate. Another issue we're going to be dealing with is the retirement wave is hitting, right? The workforce is aging. So the workers leaving the field over the next decade are outnumbering the new workers being trained to replace them. And we're already estimating that we're several 100,000 workers short. So anything that you can be doing internally to work with your high schools, your secondary education, colleges, your training sites, your state workforce development, to alert them to the issues and look for solutions. We at Mitra are doing our due diligence on the labor piece of the labor shortage piece. And again, we'd love to talk to you about some opportunities that we've uncovered there. We can talk about permits also. Every project that's fully designed needs to be fully designed and permitted with all the make ready. Nothing is worse for the crews that you have on hand than an idle crew in a tight labor market. It's a waste that you can't recover from. So lining up the crews and being proactive on the permitting and your environmental at the same time, so your workflows are running parallel and not into each other. As I said, try to invest in training where able and work with like-minded stakeholders. So supply chain and labor aren't problems that you solve in the middle of a build. They're problems that we have to be working on constantly, and that will be for the next many, many years. If your deployment timeline hasn't been stress tested against current procurement lead times, as well as crew availability, now's the time to do that. And we'd love to help you run through your pre-construction planning reviews and see common things that are called out and most impactful, and where we can catch some gaps. So please reach out to us at Mitra if there's some opportunity there for us to dialogue. And really, to start closing this out before we go to some Q&A, we've covered a lot today. So let me leave you with a couple items that I think we call the bottom line in all this in the summary. The program's moving, as we talked about. Federal hurdles have been cleared. The money is starting to move. We saw our first connections last week. The risks are known: supply chain lead times, the labor scarcity, complexity in compliance, the AI competition. Um, and then the question of whether you're planning around them or waiting until they become problems. So encouraging you to be very proactive in all of this. And then lastly, to the non-BEAD participants that we mentioned earlier, the window is right now. The relationships that you build with the awardees in the next couple of months will define your positioning. The research that you do now on the satellite areas and even potential BEAD awardees that are going to walk away from their award at the grant agreement level and choose to not sign that grant agreement. I've talked to several broadband offices that said they have already lost 10, 15, 20% of their total awardees, not necessarily their broadband locations or their project areas, but of their awardees. So one state, for example, went from roughly 17 awardees down to 12. Call to action: if you are a BEAD awardee, put your draft and signed document subgrantee agreement in your deployment timeline side by side. That homework that we gave you for over the weekend or early next week. If you're an engineering or a construction firm, identify the 2 or 3 awardees in your region who are closest to shovel ready and start those conversations if you haven't already. If you need introductions, we'd be very happy to help out there as well. If you are an electric co-op, identifying those ISPs that are going to be building in your project area. Our CEO, Sam, has started doing some mapping, some GIS overlay of project areas, and we assign each ISP a specific color. And we're looking at maps at 5, 6 county areas where there may be 5 colored dots in that area. So we know that in that particular region, those particular counties, or that particular rural electric co-op area, there may be 5 attachers to any one pole, which is crazy to think about. So if you're not sure where to fit, please schedule a quick call with us. Mitra keeps his clients list intentionally small, as we talked about. Chad, do you have any comments or announcements, or have there been any questions so far that we should go over?
None yet in chat. One question I have for you, from your experience working with government agencies and private industry, you can kind of see the different side of these programs. So, what do you think are probably the biggest misconceptions that companies still have about BEAD?
I think there is a general mindset that BEAD will solve all of our remaining connectivity issues, and I don't believe that will be the case. I think probably our friends at most of the ISPs realize that, but policymakers and local leaders and some others may not really understand that. So I think we all need to be cognizant of the fact that there are going to be grant agreements that don't get executed. There's going to be satellite that is connected or not connected, and to what degree is the adoption rate for those satellite locations. Um, we have to constantly be monitoring the new guidance that NTIA may be putting out. And then we didn't even talk about the non-deployment dollars. The BEAD program, as most of us know, is $42 billion of funding. When you look at the Connected Nation BEAD tracker, you can see that roughly 21 billion has been awarded to the states to use for their subgrantees. That 21 will decrease as ISPs walk away from their award when they run those numbers that one last time, or when they're searching for that final credit that they need for the 25% match, and the financials have changed, and their lender is no longer interested in that. So there's going to be some hiccups along the way still where areas are abandoned, and that is an ideal time for ISPs that are adjacent to those project areas to get with the broadband office and increase their award size and increase their number of served locations that they want to work with the state broadband office on. So there's a lot of things to still monitor on how this may change. And then that last $21 billion, NTIA says in the next couple months, they will finally give the states guidance on the use cases for those. We're hoping that middle mile is one that is a use case. We're definitely hoping that cybersecurity, network resiliency is something there. Ideally, they say that we can use dollars for connecting apartment by apartment and multi-dwelling units. So there's a lot of moving pieces still. So we have to we can still see that there's work to be done, but an overall mindset that BEAD solves everything is not an accurate mindset to take.
And that kind of leads into a question that Steve had for the subgrant agreements that are not signed. Are those project areas released back into bidding, or are they left out of that BEAD program altogether?
Sure. That's a great question. Steve, I just heard the Indiana broadband director talk the other day, and she said Indiana's coming up early this summer on their 6-month deadline to have those grant agreements signed. So, what happens on ones that aren't signed? I don't know yet. There was not any clear guidance given at Fiber Connect on that. There's a lot of speculation on does the broadband office instantly pivot to the second place finisher of that project area? Do they negotiate one-on-one with ISPs that are building out around that project area? Or is that some guidance that we will receive on the non-deployment funds where several $billion of those non-deployment dollars will go right back to deployment because of the abandoned locations and the unsigned agreements?
Robert had a question too. Wants to know if you have a sense for the eligibility of U.S. manufactured free space optical link solutions, not necessarily as a primary link, but perhaps for bridge infrastructure to accelerate fiber deployment. That way they can meet deadlines.
Well, that's a complex question, a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I think we'll have to say for that one, as opposed to me trying to guess and manufacture an answer right here. I have this full transparency that we can take that down, Chad, I think, and provide some future guidance, maybe a one-page LinkedIn post moving forward and get that specifically to this group here as an answer. But I better not guess right now.
So one question I have too is, what are some of the most common communication or stakeholder engagement mistakes that you see during these large scale infrastructure projects?
Sure, this really hits home to me. Before I was in the Indiana broadband office, as you mentioned in the intro, I was with OKRA, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, and that allowed me to travel across the state of Indiana and meet with local stakeholders in small group settings. And what I heard over and over in those meetings was a general mindset that when someone or some company new that comes to our community is here and we don't know about it, it causes problems. So think about that truck that's over in the ditch on a county road somewhere and starting to climb up a pole or spray paint the ground on utility locates or in somebody's driveway while they're walking up and down the right of way, scoping out where the project is going to be. I think anything that ISPs and their contractors can do proactively to engage with local leadership will be welcomed, and you can start to tell your story of why we're going to be here. And there may be some short-term pain points: traffic congestion, orange cones, one-way streets or block streets for an afternoon, traffic being directed, those kind of things. But that is a short-term pain for the long-term gain. Mitra feels that we can really help you tell that story at the local level. So please feel free to reach out to us. But I think it's really important to let local leadership know you're going to be there, why you're going to be there, and what good is going to come of that.
And that kind of leads me into my next question as well, and this is something that we're going to discuss a little more in depth next month in a webinar that we'll be doing. But for providers entering new markets through the BEAD funding, what should they understand about working with the local communities and local governments?
Um, these folks are set in their ways. They have methods of doing things, and we're probably not going to be able to come in and be disruptive and change their processes. So we're probably going to need to acquiesce to their processes and do it their way. So if that means that you have to print out these permits requests and take them in and hand them to Miss Betty at the local office, then that's probably what we have to do. Having those folks at the local level as allies and helping you tell your story will help throughout the project timeline and build out. But it will also help when it comes time to start knocking on doors and doing door hangers and advertising for your adoption rates. So I think that's a story to tell. There is really the understanding. The larger you are as an ISP, the more you have to really focus on that. Local mindset and how they do things in that particular community.
Okay. And we'll kind of discuss that just a little bit more here again next month. We'll kind of touch briefly on that. But before we do that, I've got one more question. And I guess it's if you could give one piece of strategic advice to executives leading these BEAD funded projects today, what would that piece of advice be?
I think one of the first things I think about is have someone on your team where the buck stops there and they have the answer or know where to go to find the answer. Make sure your group is not siloed. So you'll have your field crews out doing your work. You'll have your engineering group. You'll have your finance. You'll have leadership and C-level, but make sure that someone is connecting all of those and those groups within your company to each other, and also has that information to share to anyone that inquires, whether that's the press, local elected officials, the state broadband office, and state broadband office answering questions that NTIA may have asked about you and your projects. So having someone on your team that makes sure they heard the cats, but everyone knows what everyone's doing. For example, we don't want to have a compliance report due to a state broadband office, and we're chasing down contractors in the field that are trying to lay fiber because we don't have the internal documentation for what we need for those reports. That's just an example of where one part of the company needs to be talking to the other part of the company, and having somebody there that's the conduit between all those groups, I think it's important.
So to kind of wrap things up, Ernie, we're again next month we'll be doing another webinar, and Lori Cundy will be joining us. She's on the call today as well, and we'll be talking about kind of the white collar side of BEAD, if you will, and that is a lot of sales and marketing that will take place in these different communities, whether you're a BEAD winner or a non-BEAD winner. If you're a non-BEAD winner, how are you going to compete against the new guy coming into your space? And if you are a BEAD winner and you're moving into new territory, what do you need to do to kind of get ahead of things and again start to learn about the local communities and what's going on as you continue to widen your footprint? And so we'll be discussing that next month. So if you want to touch on that for just a quick minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that we continue to dialogue on all that's going on right now. And Mitra is really excited to try to provide content, and we're happy to take suggestions on what our future content could look like. But really excited to work with Chad and Lori on our next webinar.
So again, there's a lot of things that we can help with at Mitra Consulting, whether it's operational things that you want to figure out if you're having issues going through and trying to lay things out as far as uh, any planning of the programs or different phases that you're wanting to complete in construction. We can help with those kind of things. Permitting, all of that, are things that we can definitely help you with. And again, get advice from Ernie on different things that you can do as well. And we have, a lot of different consultants that can assist you on different things. One of the things that we do have as well is our Beyond Bead page, which is on LinkedIn. I just put that link up on the chat. So if you'd like to go there and kind of follow that, we keep folks updated with things that's going on with BEAD on the Mitra LinkedIn page as well as Beyond BEAD. So again, that's a good page to join get on there and get information as well. So that is available in the chat right now also. Anything else, Ernie, you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered a lot today. Great closeout and the summary, and looking forward to our next webinar and looking forward to seeing this posted. And if you have any questions specific to this webinar or any of the slides or anything else that we've covered today or anything that's on your mind that we didn't cover, we'd love to have conversations around that.
Thank you again, everyone, for attending. Again, part of the Mitra webinar series. And next month, again, we'll be discussing the sales and marketing and moving into new territories, or what do you do with someone that's moving into your footprint because of being a BEAD awardee. So we'll be doing that again next month. You'll receive an email about that and get signed up for that as well, as that's kind of the next topic that people are starting to look at as we start to get shovels in the ground. Where do we need to go from here to kind of secure different things for our company and secure those enterprise businesses and moving into new communities, and how do we go about doing that? So thank you again for everyone for attending. Thank you, Ernie, for all the great information, and we'll see you next time right here on the Mitra webinar series. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Mitra Consulting webinar series. We hope today's discussion provided valuable insight and actionable ideas you can apply within your organization. At Mitra Consulting, we're committed to helping leaders turn challenges into opportunities and strategy into success. Be sure to stay connected for future webinars, and until next time, thank you for being part of the conversation.